I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd lock her own son out of the house he thought he owned. But here I am, 72 years old, sitting in my favorite armchair with a cup of Earl Grey, watching through the window as Michael paces back and forth on what used to be his front porch, his wife Jessica frantically dialing numbers on her phone. The irony isn't lost on me that they're standing outside in the rain while I'm finally warm and dry inside. It's funny how people assume that because you're older, you're somehow weaker. They see gray hair and wrinkles and think you've lost your fight. What they don't realize is that we've simply been gathering our strength, learning patience, waiting for the right moment to remind everyone exactly who we are. The whole mess started 3 years ago when my beloved David passed away. Heart attack at 68. Gone before I could even say goodbye. 43 years of marriage. And suddenly, I was alone in our big house in Westchester, rattling around like a marble in a shoebox. That's when Michael swooped in with his concerned son routine, suggesting I move in with him and Jessica in their lovely home in Connecticut. At the time, it seemed like a blessing. Family taking care of family, just like David would have wanted. I should have known better when Jessica's first comment about my moving in was about how much my furniture would clash with her minimalist aesthetic. But grief makes you stupid sometimes. Makes you grateful for crumbs when you used to feast at your own table. So I sold my house. The one David and I had bought as newlyweds. The one where we'd raised Michael and his sister Sarah. I took the equity from that sale, nearly $400,000, and helped Michael and Jessica with their mortgage. Not a loan, mind you, a gift. Because that's what mothers do, right? The first few months weren't terrible. I had my own room, a nice one overlooking their backyard garden. I helped with their 2 children, Emma and little David, named after his grandfather. I cooked dinner most nights because Jessica was always too busy with her lifestyle blog, photographing her morning smoothies and writing captions about finding balance. Michael worked long hours at his accounting firm, coming home exhausted and distracted. I told myself I was useful, needed, part of a family again. But slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice at first, things began to change. It started with small things. Jessica would rearrange my belongings while I was out, claiming she was just tidying up. My reading glasses would disappear from the side table where I'd left them, only to turn up in random places around the house. When I asked about it, she'd laugh and say, "I must be getting forgetful. Wasn't that just part of aging?" The bills started appearing on my dresser without explanation. First, it was just the electric bill, with a little note from Jessica saying how expensive it was to heat such a big house. Then came the children's private school tuition, the grocery bills, Jessica's credit card statements from her shopping trips to designer stores, each one accompanied by that same sweet smile and a casual comment about how lucky they were to have me there to help. I paid them all. Every single one. What else was I supposed to do? This was my family. My son's family. These were my grandchildren, who needed their school fees paid, who needed food on the table. I justified it by telling myself I was living rent-free, that this was my contribution to the household. The breaking point should have been when I came home from my book club one Tuesday afternoon to find my wedding photos packed away in a box in the basement, Jessica explained, with that practiced smile of hers, that she was redecorating the living room, and my pictures didn't fit the new color scheme. When I looked to Michael for support, he just shrugged and mumbled something about it being Jessica's house, her rules. But even that wasn't enough to wake me up completely. I was still operating under the delusion that I was part of this family, that my feelings and comfort mattered to them. The real wake-up call came on a bright Saturday morning in October. I was in the kitchen making pancakes for the children when Jessica's friend Tiffany stopped by for coffee. They sat at the island, speaking in those stage whispers that are meant to be overheard, discussing Jessica's plans to convert my bedroom into a home studio for her growing influencer career. I kept my back to them, focusing on flipping pancakes, but every word hit me like a physical blow. "She's been here 3 years now," Jessica was saying. "I mean, we've been so generous, taking her in like this. But honestly, Tiff, I need that room. My follower count is exploding, and I could really use a dedicated space for filming." "Where will she go?" Tiffany asked, though her tone suggested she didn't particularly care about the answer. Jessica laughed, that tinkling sound she made when she was being particularly cruel. "Oh, we'll figure something out. Maybe the guest room over the garage. It's smaller, but at her age, how much space does she really need? Besides, it's not like she has anywhere else to go." That last sentence echoed in my head as I stood there, spatula in hand, feeling something inside me crystallize into perfect, clear rage. Not like she has anywhere else to go. As if I were some charity case, some burden they'd graciously taken on out of the goodness of their hearts. I served breakfast with my usual smile, asked about everyone's plans for the day, helped Emma with her math homework. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was coldly, calculating angry, and that anger was sharpening into something that felt remarkably like purpose. That afternoon, while Jessica was out getting her nails done, and Michael was at his office, catching up on weekend work, I made a phone call to my old friend Margaret, the one who'd handled the legal paperwork when I'd contributed to Michael and Jessica's mortgage. Margaret had been my attorney for 20 years, had handled David's will, had tried to talk me out of giving away my house money without proper documentation. "Eleanor," she said when I explained the situation, "please tell me you didn't just hand over $400,000 without getting your name on that deed. You know me better than that, Margaret. I may be old, but I'm not stupid." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "No, you're certainly not. So, you're a co-owner of that house?" 51%. According to the paperwork you drew up. I believe you called it protecting my investment at the time. "I did indeed. So what exactly are you planning to do with this information?" I looked around the kitchen, at the granite countertops I'd helped pay for, the high-end appliances that had been purchased with my money, the breakfast nook where I'd fed my son's family countless meals while they treated me like an unwelcome house guest. "I'm planning to remind them who actually owns this house, Margaret. And then, I'm going to decide whether they're the kind of tenants I want to keep." The first thing I did was change the locks. I did it on a Wednesday morning while everyone was out, called a locksmith, and had him install a completely new security system. Michael and Jessica came home to find they couldn't get into their own house. I watched from the living room window as Jessica pulled out her phone, probably calling me, but I'd already blocked their numbers. Michael tried his key over and over, his face growing redder with each failed attempt. Finally, they started pounding on the door. I opened it with a pleasant smile, the same one I'd been wearing for 3 years, while they slowly eroded my dignity. "Eleanor, what the hell is going on?" Michael demanded, pushing past me into the foyer. "Why don't our keys work?" "Because this is my house, Michael. I've decided I need to make some changes." Jessica was right behind him, her face flushed with indignation. "Your house? We live here. Our children live here. You can't just change the locks." I pulled out the deed Margaret had messengered over that morning, the one clearly showing my majority ownership of the property. "Actually, I can. You're living in my house, Jessica. You've been living in my house for 3 years, thanks to my generosity. But generosity has its limits. The color drained from both their faces as they read the legal document. Michael sank into one of the living room chairs, the ones I'd helped pay for, while Jessica stood there opening and closing her mouth like a fish. "This is impossible," she finally managed. "We pay the mortgage. This is our home. You pay a portion of the mortgage with money I give you every month," I corrected gently. "And you're right. This has been your home. But you've made it very clear that I'm not part of your family. Just a convenient ATM who happens to take up space. So, I've decided it's time for some new arrangements." I had their attention now. Complete and total attention, probably for the first time since I'd moved in. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, settling into my chair with my tea. "You have two choices. You can buy out my share of the house at current market value, which Margaret estimates at around $600,000 for my 51%. Or, you can continue living here, under my rules." "Your rules?" Michael's voice cracked slightly. "That's right. My house, my rules. First rule: respect. You will speak to me with the same courtesy you'd show any landlord, because that's essentially what I am. Second rule: financial transparency. No more mysterious bills appearing on my desk. If you want help with expenses, you ask politely and explain exactly what the money is for. Third rule: my space is my space. My bedroom, my belongings, my photos stay exactly where I want them." Jessica found her voice again, though it was higher than usual. "You can't be serious. We have children, Eleanor. They can't just be uprooted because you're having some kind of senior moment." That was her mistake. Playing the age card. I'd been expecting it. Planning for it. "Oh, I'm perfectly serious, and perfectly competent. In fact, I've already spoken to a property manager about converting this house into rental units if current tenants don't work out. The market for family homes in this area is quite strong, I'm told." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads as they calculated mortgage payments, moving costs, rental deposits, all the expenses they'd become accustomed to me covering. Michael was the first to crack. "Mom, we can work this out. We're family." "Are we, Michael?" "Because for 3 years, I've felt more like a live-in financial contributor than a family member. Your wife just suggested moving me to the garage apartment so she could take over my bedroom. That doesn't sound like family to me." Jessica shot Michael a look that could have melted steel, but it was too late for damage control. "I never said garage apartment," she protested weakly. "Room over the garage, then." "My mistake." I smiled pleasantly. "The point remains the same. You see me as an inconvenience to be managed, not a person to be respected. So we're going to try a new approach." What followed were the most interesting weeks of my life in years. Suddenly, I was getting good morning wishes and offers to help with my coat. Jessica stopped rearranging my things and actually asked permission before making changes to common areas. Michael started coming home for dinner instead of working late, helping with dishes, asking about my day. The children, bless them, adapted quickly to the new dynamics. Emma, who was 12 and sharp as a tack, seemed almost relieved that someone was finally setting boundaries in the house. Little David, only 8, just wanted his grandmother to keep making her famous chocolate chip cookies, which I was happy to do. But I could see the resentment simmering beneath Jessica's newfound politeness. She'd smile at me across the breakfast table, while her eyes calculated how quickly she could get me declared incompetent. She'd ask sweetly about my plans for the day while clearly hoping I'd have the courtesy to die quietly in my sleep. The real test came 6 weeks later, when Jessica's mother called to invite us all to Thanksgiving dinner. Jessica accepted graciously, then informed me I'd be expected to bring my famous sweet potato casserole and help with the cooking, since her mother was getting on in years and needed assistance. "How old is your mother, Jessica?" I asked pleasantly. 68, why? Just curious. That's exactly how old I was when you and Michael decided I was too old to manage on my own and needed to move in with you. The look on her face was priceless. I continued smiling as I delivered my next line. "I think it's wonderful that you want to help your aging mother. Family should take care of family, don't you think? I'll be spending Thanksgiving with my daughter Sarah in California, but I'm sure your mother will understand that I can't be in two places at once." That was when Jessica finally showed her true colors. The sweet mask slipped completely, revealing the calculating, entitled woman underneath. "You can't just leave for Thanksgiving. We have plans. We're counting on you. The way you counted on me to give up my bedroom without discussion? The way you counted on me to pay your bills without question? The way you counted on me to have nowhere else to go?" Michael tried to intervene, sensing his wife was about to make things worse. But Jessica was beyond hearing reason. "This is ridiculous, Eleanor. You're acting like a spoiled child. We took you in when you had nothing, gave you a home, treated you like family, and this is how you repay us? Took me in when I had nothing?" I repeated slowly. "Jessica, I owned my home outright when David died. I had $400,000 in equity, plus his life insurance, plus both our retirement accounts. I had something. What I didn't have was a family that valued me for anything other than my bank account." The truth hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. Michael looked sick, finally understanding how his wife had framed our living arrangement in her mind. Jessica looked trapped, caught between her public narrative and the ugly reality of her behavior. That night, I heard them arguing in their bedroom, voices raised just enough for me to catch fragments through the walls. Jessica was pushing for them to declare me mentally incompetent, to take control of my finances, to have me committed to a nursing home if necessary. Michael, to his credit, was resisting, but I could hear the weakness in his voice, the way he always capitulated to her stronger will. I made another phone call to Margaret the next morning. "I want to establish a trust," I told her. "Something ironclad, with very specific provisions about my mental competency and care. And I want to update my will." "Expecting trouble?" "Preparing for it. My daughter-in-law has shown her hand, and it's not a pretty one." The paperwork was in place within a week. A medical trust administered by Margaret's firm, with provisions for independent psychological evaluation if my competency was ever questioned. And a will that made my intentions crystal clear. Jessica would inherit exactly nothing from me, regardless of what happened to Michael. I didn't tell them about these changes immediately. Instead, I went to California for Thanksgiving as planned, spending a wonderful week with Sarah and her family. My daughter had built a good life for herself, married a kind man, raised 2 respectful children, who called their grandmother every week, just to chat. It was a sharp contrast to the household I'd left behind in Connecticut. When I returned, I found that Jessica had used my absence to redecorate the living room, removing the last traces of my presence from the common areas. My knitting basket was gone from beside my chair. My reading glasses and books cleared from the side table. Even my favorite throw blanket replaced with something that better matched her color scheme. But the final insult was in my bedroom. Jessica had installed a new lock on the door, and when I tried my key, it didn't work. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, feeling that familiar crystallization of rage, that sharpening of purpose I'd experienced months earlier in the kitchen. Then I smiled, pulled out my phone, and called Margaret. I need that property manager we discussed, I said calmly. It's time to explore other options for this house. The eviction notice was served by the sheriff 3 days later. Perfectly legal, perfectly proper, giving them 30 days to vacate the premises or face legal action. I watched from my window as Jessica signed for the papers, her face white with shock. The tantrum that followed was spectacular. Jessica screamed, threatened, accused me of elder abuse, of mental incompetence, of destroying the children's lives. Michael tried to reason with me, pleading for more time, for a chance to work things out, for consideration of his children's needs. The children are welcome to visit me anytime, I said calmly. You and Jessica are not. You have 30 days to find alternative housing. Where are we supposed to go? Jessica demanded, tears streaming down her face. We don't have money for deposits and moving expenses. You might try asking your mother for help, I suggested. I'm sure a woman of 68 has plenty of resources to assist her family in their time of need. The irony wasn't lost on Michael, who actually winced at the comparison. They tried everything in those 30 days. Lawyers who told them they had no legal recourse since I was the majority owner, and they were essentially tenants at will. Social workers who found me perfectly competent and my request for them to move out entirely reasonable. Even a priest from their church, who listened to their story and then suggested they might want to consider family counseling to address the underlying issues in their relationship with me. I spent those 30 days planning my new life. The house was too big for one person, but I'd grown attached to it, to the garden I'd helped plant, to the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals for a family that saw me as nothing more than a convenient servant. So I decided to keep it, to make it truly mine for the first time. On moving day, I sat in my favorite chair with my tea, watching as the men loaded boxes and furniture into a truck. Jessica supervised with tight-lipped efficiency, her designer clothes rumpled and her perfectly styled hair showing gray roots she hadn't had time to touch up. Michael looked older, beaten down by the weight of consequences he'd never thought would come. Little David came to hug me goodbye, tears streaming down his 8-year-old cheeks. "Why can't we live with you anymore, Grandma?" he asked. And my heart nearly broke, because sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt other people, I told him gently. And when that happens, there have to be consequences. But you can come visit me anytime your parents say it's okay. Emma, wise beyond her 12 years, understood better. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm sorry Mommy was mean to you, Grandma. You didn't deserve that." After they left, I walked through my empty house, really seeing it for the first time in 3 years. Without Jessica's cold minimalism, without the tension and resentment that had filled every corner, it felt like a home again. I could put my wedding photos back on the mantle, arrange my furniture the way I liked it, fill the rooms with warmth and personality, instead of Instagram-worthy sterility. I called Sarah that evening to tell her what had happened. "Good for you, Mom," she said fiercely. "I never liked how they treated you, but I didn't know how to say anything without making things worse. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have listened? You were so determined to help Michael, to be the good mother and grandmother. Sometimes we have to figure these things out for ourselves." She was right, of course. I'd needed to reach my own breaking point, to find my own strength, to remember who I was beneath all the guilt and grief and misplaced obligation. The house is quiet now, but it's a good quiet, a peaceful quiet. I've joined a book club, started volunteering at the local hospital, reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my 3 years of servitude. I have dinner parties again, real ones with conversation and laughter, instead of silent meals punctuated by Jessica's passive-aggressive comments about my cooking. Michael calls sometimes. Awkward conversations where he apologizes without really understanding what he's apologizing for. Jessica never calls, which is probably for the best. The children visit once a month, supervised visits that Jessica endures because she needs me to babysit while she works her part-time job at a boutique, the only employment she could find after her influencer career failed to pay the bills. I don't take pleasure in their struggles, but I don't feel guilty about them either. They're learning the same lesson I had to learn: that actions have consequences, that relationships require mutual respect, that family is about more than just sharing DNA. Sometimes, late at night when the house is still, and I'm sitting in my chair with my tea, I think about David and what he'd make of all this. He was a gentleman, a peacemaker, who avoided conflict whenever possible. But he was also a man who believed in fairness, in standing up for what's right, in protecting the people you love. I think he'd understand why I had to draw the line, why I had to stop letting our son and his wife treat me like a convenient ATM. I think he'd be proud of me for finding my strength again, for remembering that I'm worth more than what I can provide for other people. The woman who was afraid to ask for her own photographs back, who paid bills without question, and accepted insults without protest, that woman is gone. In her place is someone I'd almost forgotten existed. Eleanor Vance, retired head nurse of the ICU, widow, mother, grandmother, and owner of a beautiful house in Connecticut that she's finally made into a home. I'm 72 years old, and I'm just getting started.